Hi, this is Andrew, and this is Keen On, the daily now.tv chat show with some of the world's leading thinkers and writers. Hello, everybody. It is March the 11th, a Monday, 2024, beginning of the week. Old theme again today, the crisis of the internet. We've done many shows on the problems with the internet. One, for example, on the age of surveillance capitalism, many were the leading critics of the internet, but we haven't done one with a man of the substance of Frank H. McCourt Jr., at least in business terms. He's a very prominent businessman, very well known broadly in the culture. He's owned the Los Angeles Dodgers and many other large corporations. He's also the man behind a new initiative called Project Liberty, which is advancing the responsible development of the internet of tomorrow and designed and governed for the common good. And Frank has penned a book, Our Biggest Fight, Reclaiming Liberty, Humanity, and Dignity in the Digital Age. And he is joining us from New York City, from Hudson Yard. Frank, congratulations on the new book. Why, you're a busy man, you're not an author as such, you don't rely on the revenue from books. Why did you choose to pen this book, Our Biggest Fight? A very bold title.
Well, yeah. Hi, Andrew. Nice to be with you. And let's be clear that the proceeds that I get from this book are going to Project Liberty, because this is a hugely important project at what I would call a moment of crisis. And some might say, well, that's hyperbole. What do you mean by a crisis? And what's wrong with the tech? Yeah, I know it does some bad things, but doesn't it do good things, et cetera, et cetera. And in your intro, you talked about a lot of the harms that we're learning more and more about every day in terms of the damage the current version of the internet is doing. And that ranges from harms to young children to undermining democracy and everything in between. And the insight that Project Liberty brings forward is that we can fix this, and we must fix this. And certainly before we make this technology more powerful with generative artificial intelligence, we need to fix what's broken. And we can do this, and there is a tech fix to this. And then I think once we return ownership and control of data to individuals, which I would argue is where it belongs, and which I get to in great detail in the book. Data is our personhood. I think it's a mistake to just think of it as data. It's everything about us in the world we live in now, which is a digital world. And so we need to reclaim ownership and control of that information. And once we do that, and we create an internet that's more transparent, and an internet where we're able to benefit economically from our personal data, then I think we'll be on the right track, and we'll enjoy the benefits of even more powerful technology.
Frank, the subtitle of the book is Reclaiming Liberty, Humanity, and Dignity in the Digital Age. Are you suggesting in Our Biggest Fight and in your work at the Project Liberty that we've lost, and these are big words, Frank, you don't need me to tell you that, liberty, humanity, and dignity? What has happened to liberty, humanity, and dignity in the digital age?
Yeah, well, the way the tech is designed, which to scrape our digital information, all the information about us, and aggregate it in a few big platforms, and then have it optimized for things that these corporations decide unbeknownst to us. It is really, as I said, stripping us of our personhood. And I don't think it's any exaggeration to say that we're becoming subjects again, and we're losing our citizenship in a digital age. What I talk about in the book, I compare this to the American project, one where this country was created by people who actually put the choice to early settlers in what became the United States of America, and said, look, you can continue to be a subject of a monarch, or you can choose to be a citizen. That was the point Thomas Paine made in his pamphlet, Common Sense. And it was a very provocative choice, and one that really put it to his fellow settlers in the colonies. And it was, I think, a light bulb went off for people saying, we don't have to be a subject any longer to somebody born into royalty, and we have the same rights as that king or queen, and we're born with them, and they became known as our unalienable rights. Well, people fought long and hard for these rights, and why on earth would we give them up just to be able to use the internet?
Yeah, Frank, this is all very stirring, but you talk about the loss of personhood on the internet. I don't quite understand what you mean. I mean, of course, yes, the platforms take some of our data. They're annoying. They throw advertising at us. But how are we losing our personhood on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or TikTok or Google? I don't understand.
Well, there's a lot of discussion about TikTok right now, and this hue and cry that TikTok should be banned. Why? Because China is scraping all this personal data about all of us, and that are on TikTok, and all American citizens, and the Chinese Communist Party now has all of this vast amounts of personal information about Americans. Well, but tell me, Andrew, how is the technology of Twitter or Meta or Google different? Aren't they scraping and
what does that? Yeah, you've used this term, Frank, scraping personal data. It sounds rather dirty. What does that mean? I mean, TikTok, of course, is another story. Maybe we can get to that with China. I'm personally not on TikTok, so I don't think TikTok has any access. Either TikTok or the Chinese government has any access to my own personal data. But leaving TikTok aside, what does that mean, scraping our personal data?
The internet, as it has evolved, has become a highly centralized, autocratic, surveillance-based internet. It wasn't designed to be that. It was designed to be a decentralized technology. It's become highly centralized in what we call the app era, the era of these big apps, whether they're owned by China or the United States. And the way these apps work is by constantly accumulating, I would argue, stealing, scraping our data and aggregating it, and then applying their algorithms to it for whatever purpose. It may be a commercial purpose, and which is selling things, or it may be a purpose of getting us to read something or think in a certain way or be provoked. The point is that there are tens of thousands of data points and personal attributes of each of us that are now in the purview, the control of a few large platforms. As I mentioned in the book, in 2016, ProPublica had mentioned that then Facebook had 50,000 individual attributes on everybody on Facebook. 50,000. Now that number has surely increased in the last 8 years, and that's just one platform. I don't think people realize the amount of information, i.e., virtually everything about them, is now digitized and is residing somewhere in someone's control, and it's not democratic in the least. I don't think if I asked Andrew for you to choose 3 words or phrases to describe democracy, I don't think you would say centralized, autocratic, and surveillance-based. These platforms are scraping, accumulating our data, and then doing stuff with it. And I think this needs to be corrected so that the technology works for people, not just the objectives of these platforms.
You mentioned Facebook. Again, I'm not on Facebook. People choose to go on it. It's a free service, for better or worse. We can avoid these things, Frank, can't we? I mean, just choose, as some people might say, and certainly in Silicon Valley, if you don't, it's like that old It's like that old Berkeley bumper sticker about abortion. Abortion, don't like it, don't have one. Can't we say the same about Facebook or Google or any of the other platforms? We can simply avoid using them. There are alternatives. There are lots of decentralized social media platforms, Mastodon, for example. There's DuckDuckGo if you don't like Google. Why can't we just sidestep these platforms?
Well, because there really is no alternative at the moment. You mentioned a few use cases, but they're very, very small in comparison. You know, we now have the largest decentralized social network in the world, and it's about 700,000 people. And that's a small fraction of what's required to have scale and to be a true alternative that people will migrate to in mass numbers. The reality is this idea of putting, quote, free things in people's hands and get them to use them it's very insidious, because it's not free at all. And quite frankly, they're designed to be highly addictive. And we're learning that as well now, that there's a addictive quality to this by design. Andrew, if I was the head of the U.S. Postal Service and I came to you and I said, I'm going to give you free stamps, or no stamps. I will take care of your mail for free. No more postage stamps. You might be a little suspicious, but you would listen to my offer, because if I could send it for free rather than buying a stamp, why not? And then if I said to you, okay, but in exchange, I want to put a camera in every one of your rooms of your home and in your car and in your workplace, I think you'd be probably reluctant. And then
I mean, it's an interesting comparison, Frank. I'm not sure it works that way. I mean, I thought what you were going to say was, if you own the post office, the deal would be you can have free stamps if we can read your letters. And that's perhaps a more exact, I mean, not exact, but that's isn't that a better simile than allowing the post office to watch everything we do?
Yeah, maybe I was too wordy, because I was going to add exactly that. I was going to say, and in addition to the cameras, by the way, we're going to open your mail and read it and benefit from everything we read, and benefit from your relationships.
But it would be an alternative. They might. I mean, the post office simile is an interesting one, because, of course, the post office has always been a politicized institution in the history of the United States. Some people might say that's fine. You can read whatever you like. And if you give me free stamps, it's worth it for me. Other people would object. And I can't speak, Frank, obviously, on behalf of Silicon Valley, but I think their point would be, even if what you're saying is true, and I think they would dispute it, they would argue that no algorithm, no one at Facebook or Google or X, nobody ever reads the letter. All they're looking for are keywords to serve up advertising, which is their business model. So no one's actually undermining, borrowing language from you, anyone's liberty or humanity or dignity. It's an advertising business, and they're trying to help their clients by identifying effective ways of doing advertising online.
Well, I beg to differ. I think that's one of the things they do, but it's not all that they do. These machines now are able to predict they've made judgments, assessments of our personality, of our emotional reaction to things, of our makeup, what they can feed us more of. It's not just advertising, Andrew. Come on, let's be realistic. It's what we read, how we think, and as I said earlier, these are highly addictive, dopamine-inducing models that are harming young children whose brains haven't even fully developed. And we know it's difficult for an adult addict to rid themselves of the addiction. How on earth can young children do that? So to think of this simply as, a few harmless ads, what's the trouble, is just missing the point massively. How is it possible, Andrew, that we have elections in this country that come down to 5,000 votes or 10,000 votes? Is anybody other than myself wondering why
Well,
everything's so
but
polarized?
Frank, that was the case back in the Gore Bush controversy, a few hundred votes in Florida, and the internet, there wasn't even Web 2.0 then. Doesn't that reflect the American political system? It's got nothing to do with the internet.
I think what we have is technology in everybody's hands that's designed to polarize us. It's designed to keep us triggered, and half the people on one side and half the people on the other side. I I I personally believe, and you can agree or disagree with me, that we are losing. We are. This technology is sucking the soul out of us. It's dehumanizing us. And I would say, technology which is designed to connect machines, we're still IP addresses on the internet, for gosh sakes, we're not even people, is is harmful. Why not put people in charge of their data? Whether you're right or wrong, isn't it better to put people in charge of their own social graph, of their own personal relationships, of their own attributes, and let them, as you say, decide to do whatever they'd like to do with it? I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is we have no choice. We are being surveilled. We're being dehumanized. Our information is being taken from us, and it's being used in all kinds of way. You mentioned commercial way. Good. Let's talk about that. If it's being used to make trillions of dollars, then why not people who are generating the data benefit from that economically? We have moved from subjects to citizens, and now we're moving back from citizens back to subjects again. The lords this time and the kings are just not in robes and crowns. They happen to be in t-shirts in Silicon Valley, and it's just not right. For if one prioritizes democracy and cares about it and prioritizes taking care of young kids, how is it that young kids are polled and they don't think their life is going to be any better than their parents? Isn't there something fundamentally wrong when that's the case?
Of course, but I don't quite know what's that got to do with the internet. The general pessimism these days.
Well, read the book, because I think it has everything to do with the internet and how it's designed. It was never designed to do what it's doing. How is it possible to have something, a communications technology connecting billions of people, and you don't even have to be a person, or you don't even know if you're talking to a person? You can be a machine spitting out toxicity and poison and fake news. How are we going to govern ourselves? How are we going to have a thriving economy if we destroy trust? And you can't argue with me, I don't think, that the internet and social media in particular is destroying trust in society, because we don't know what's fact and fiction anymore. And the technology that's developing is getting better and better and better at making fake things look real. And you tell me, how do we govern ourselves if we don't have a shared set of facts? How do we govern ourselves if we don't have trust between us? We have a massive mess.
It certainly looks like a massive mess, Frank. I want to get to the fixes, because that's, I think, the core thing in our biggest fight. And you have maybe a Web3 style fix to the internet. But before we get there, I just want to come back briefly, and then we'll take a break. I want to come back to a comparison you made. You referenced Thomas Paine. You talk about him in the book, and his book, Common Sense. We did a show late last year with Peter Slen of C-SPAN about Paine's Common Sense being one of America's 10 greatest books. Do you think, you seem to suggest that this fight, what you call our biggest fight, is equivalent to the rebellion against the British, the arguments that Paine laid out in Common Sense? Are you suggesting that we're back in 1776 all over again?
Yeah, in certain ways, which the book makes clear. This revolution does not require us to shed blood. Obviously, it's a different moment in time, but I don't think it's hyperbole to say our citizenship, our humanity, our dignity is in fact at stake. Look, my forebears came to this country to escape a place where they had nothing. All right, they had not even enough food to eat, because the monarch wouldn't allow them to have the food. All right, they came from Ireland. They couldn't own anything, and they had virtually no human rights. And they came to a place, America, where they had rights, where they were treated as an equal, where they were part of a self-governing environment, right, of, by, and for the people, and they could own things and build a life. And my family, thankfully, has built a great life. I'm a beneficiary. I'm a fifth generation of a business enterprise where my great grandfather started building roads when Henry Ford started building cars. So we're very much part of the American project, and I don't want to see this slip away. And quite frankly, we're giving up much of what not only my forebears, but generations of people have fought for and built in this country, so that we have liberty, freedom, individual agency, autonomy, control. This is America's secret sauce. And why on earth would we give that up to be able to use the internet? Why not have an internet that actually is in harmony with these values and principles that have made us the greatest country on earth?
We are speaking with the great Frank H. McCourt Jr., the author of Our Biggest Fight, Reclaiming Liberty, Humanity, and Dignity in the Digital Age. Frank is certainly not short on his punches. He believes that this is indeed our biggest fight. And I want to come in the second part of the show to how to get beyond this fight. He's talked about the challenge, and now what are we going to do about it? I want to remind everyone that this show and wonderful guests like Frank H. McCourt Jr. are brought to us because of Liberties, a quarterly journal of culture and politics. We don't collect your data. We don't watch on you. We don't undermine liberty, humanity, or dignity. In fact, Liberties is in the business of supporting those things. I'm going to run a short feature on the Liberties Quarterly, and then we'll be back with Frank McCourt to talk about how we're going to fix the internet. So don't go away, anyone. We'll be back in a second.
News, the noise, there is nuance, insight. Liberties is not just a journal of ideas. It's a meteor of intelligent substance. It's the place to be for engaged citizens. Politics, opinion, substance. Liberties is a triumph for freedom of thought. A quarterly of urgency, of cultural exploration, of intellectual delight, of immaculate prose. It's invaluable. Subscribe now or find Liberties at your favorite bookseller.
You can subscribe to Liberties at libertiesjournal.com. They don't collect IDs, and they don't even have advertising. It's an excellent new publication. Strongly recommended, as is Frank H. McCourt Jr.'s new book, Our Biggest Fight, Reclaiming Liberty, Humanity, and Dignity in the Digital Age. So, Frank, we talked in the first part of the conversation about how things have gone wrong. You believe they've gone profoundly wrong. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to re-architect, restructure the internet? That seems to be the core goal, certainly in the book and in your Project Liberty.
Yeah, I think it's very core and very fundamental that we fix the tech architecture. I think we need to do some other things as well. Project Liberty is in part a tech project, but it's really as much a social project, and we'll get to that in a moment. I'd like to talk about all three of the tracks of Project Liberty, but let's focus on the technology first. So the internet works based on some simple core protocols that we've agreed to adopt. And in '83, a group of researchers who knew one another and trusted one another agreed to adopt the two protocols actually that are co-joined now, TCP/IP. And devices that adopted that protocol were connected, and the internet was born. One footnote, we still are an IP address on the internet. We're not a person on the internet. We're a device on the internet. In 1989, Tim Berners-Lee came forward with yet another simple thin layer protocol called HTTP, which linked data on the internet, and the World Wide Web was born. And things were fine at that point. Both were decentralized open source protocols, and we were building some awesome technology. And by the way, Project Liberty is a pro-technology project. We just want to get it right. But something else happened in the 20 years ago, plus or minus, and that is we entered the what I call the app era, and that is the dominance of these large platforms that find ways to access and accumulate and aggregate our data and then do stuff with it. And that's where we went off the rails, and that's where a decentralized internet became highly centralized, and where the problems began and then started to grow. And now we're dealing with a significant number of really, really disabling problems that are sapping us of energy and time and resources and collective action to mitigate the problems caused, as opposed to redeploying all that energy to actually a better future for everyone. And we argue that another protocol, another thin layer open source protocol, we call it DSNP, Decentralized Social Networking Protocol, needs to be adopted, which will put us in charge of ourselves on the internet. So for the first time, you'll be a real human being to have the privilege of using the internet, and only be able to be one, and you'll be verifiable to others. You may be anonymous, but you'll be verifiable, and we'll have a human-centric or human-forward internet where individuals will have agency returned to them. They'll own and control their data, and when I say own, they'll own their portion of the social graph. Of course, the value in our social graphs is the relationship, so it involves other people, but ownership implies that there's value there that we can benefit from, and control is getting to the point that why don't we decide who gets to use our data? Why not a new internet where the apps that are built are clicking on our terms of use and not vice versa? So if we can get this other protocol out into the world, it's already out, it's already being used, it's already the largest decentralized network on the internet. So the tech is working, the engineering fix is in place. Now let's socialize this idea further to get people to migrate at scale, which starts to speak to the other tracks of Project Liberty, both the social scientists coming forward with their best practices, and then making this a cause for citizens, for civil society.
Frank, we've done a number of shows on the blockchain revolution, what some people call Web3, people like Don Tapscott. It sounds to me as if what you're describing isn't that different. How does Project Liberty, what is Project Liberty's position? What's your position towards Web3 and the blockchain revolution? This new protocol you're talking about, is this a Web3 protocol? Is this going to be applied centrally? How's it going to happen?
Yeah, so great question. The DSNP is not tokenized. It's blockchain agnostic, and it's a open source core internet protocol, just like HTTP. So where blockchain comes into the picture is in for very specific purposes, like identity, discoverability, attestation, verification, provenance, and so on and so forth. So in the book, I don't talk about Web3 or blockchain or crypto, because I think it gets us off the point. Blockchain is technology that's available today that wasn't available 20 years ago, that can solve for a number of the fundamental flaws of the current internet. And we should take advantage of those technologies that are now available. But Project Liberty is not a blockchain project, and I would argue the fix to the internet is not simply blockchain. DSNP, as I say, is not not tokenized. It's open source, and so it's a combination of technologies and a combination of things that will fix the internet. But why not use some of the innovations that are now available to solve for some of the fundamental problems. For instance, making sure that we know that someone else on the internet is who they say they are, and that they're a real person, not a machine bot, spewing all kinds of things into the in corrupting our information ecosystem. So there are blockchain alone will not solve the problems, but a protocol like DSMP and surgical use of blockchain and other technologies that will be built will solve the problem.
Who determined this protocol? Is this a Project Liberty developed product? Is this what you're doing at Project Liberty, providing the protocol to what programmers?
Yes, it's being used now by lots of people, and there's a group of really fascinating and well experienced people, not just in technology, but also in the social scientists that are now the stewards of DSNP, and there's an advisory council that exists where they're doing their work, and there's a lot of people now building on DSNP. As I said earlier, it's available to everyone. I'll tell you a little bit about how this came to be. When I was talking to Braxton Woodham, who leads our labs team, about the problem and about potential fixes, if one could wave a magic wand, he mentioned something that he and Harry Evans, our CTO, was working on, which is this idea of converting our social graphs, rather than billions of atomized graphs, into a universally accessible global social graph, so that the data would be, all of our data would be in shared state in the internet, and the network effect would not be the exclusive privilege of 5 big platforms. And I was fascinated by the concept. For me, it was actually an aha moment, because I felt it was brilliant to be thinking about this in terms of our social graph, because that is the holy grail of how the internet now is creating value for all these big companies. And I asked him to go out and scour the world and find out who was thinking in a similar way, so we could join forces. And he came back to me and told me that there was nobody thinking in exactly this way, which is at the network level, as opposed to some of the federated examples that you mentioned earlier in this podcast. And I was, I guess, a little surprised that nobody was thinking about it the same way. But on the other hand, it really supported the notion that this was a highly insightful way of thinking about a fix. And so in December of 2019, I greenlit the project for Braxton and Harry to put together an enlarged team, develop the protocol, the white paper at first, and then release the specs and build this out, including the wireframe, the full stack, to make sure that it actually worked in the way that we anticipated. I wanted to that assurance before I opened my mouth and started talking about this quite openly. And so that was how it evolved, and the project was greenlit here in New York on Statue of Liberty Island, where we had just had a company outing, and the Statue of Liberty was right outside the window where Braxton and I were talking, and the next day he just named the project Project Liberty, and that name is stuck.
Frank, some people are going to be watching this and thinking, well, Frank McCourt, he's a very wealthy, powerful man, maybe not quite as wealthy or powerful as Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, but nonetheless, a man worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He's got an idea. He's promising to rebuild trust, but they'll think to themselves, why should we trust Frank McCourt? We've had these promises before. Zuckerberg made promises. Elon Musk continues to make promises. Jeff Bezos made promises. Page and Brin at Google made promises. None of those promises have been realized. Why should we trust you?
Well, I'm not asking anyone to trust me. I'm asking them to trust themselves. Ourbigestfight.com, go to the site, and that will take you to dsmp.org and projectliberty.io, and you'll learn everything there is about the work that's being done by lots of brilliant people. It's a project that I founded and I lead, but there are many people working on it, much smarter and more able than I. This is not my biggest fight. This is our biggest fight, and we need lots of people involved. And thankfully, they're getting involved. We have now 5 universities involved who are coming forward, not just with the technology, but also bringing forward the smartest social scientists in the world, ethicists, economic, brilliant economic minds, behavioral scientists, psychologists, and policy and governance experts, et cetera, so that the next generation of the internet is designed not just by technologists and computer scientists, but also by social scientists. And as I say, there's also a lot of people. There are now 80 organizations that have joined the Alliance, the Project Liberty Alliance, people that are gravely concerned, and organizations gravely concerned about the harms that the current technology is doing to their own work and to society generally. And so this isn't about trust Frank. This is about do your diligence, trust yourself, and get involved. And I'm not sure that's the approach that Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, took when he referred to the people that were buying into his idea, the face mash or whatever it was called originally, and referring to them in a pejorative way, and just saying that they were dumb to trust him, and because he was scraping all their data. And I don't think a move fast and break things mentality is. I know it's not the one that Project Liberty is bringing forward. We have broken things. So if that was the goal, then I would say that Silicon Valley achieved their objective. But now we need to fix what's broken before generative AI enters the picture, and we have now a more powerful version of the same essential model, which is exploiting people's data. And let's fix what's broken, and then move into the world of AI and the next, or I should say, the next generation of AI, because algorithms are AI, and let's have this technology, which is so awesome and so powerful and holds so much promise, be technology that works for society and puts human beings in charge of their data and returns liberty and choice and autonomy and agency to people. I think it's fundamental. I think this is as fundamental as the Thomas Paine choice of being a subject.
Well, you mentioned Paine, but Paine, of course, was ultimately, I think, disappointed with the American Revolution and with the Federalist outcome. You've mentioned AI. Already, you don't need me to tell you this, the AI revolution is happening in Silicon Valley, being led by OpenAI, already worth over $100 billion, and so-called startups like Anthropic, which are also worth several $billion. How will your new way of doing the internet, these protocols, how do they change AI, which is operating in a different way from the Web 2.0 economy and economics of Facebook and Google?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. And before I answer it, let me just point out that the generative AI, the next wave of the current model is not being led by Anthropic and OpenAI. It's being led by the 5 large tech platforms. I mean, there's a reason why OpenAI went to Microsoft, right? And it's who has the large data sets and the large compute power. It's really the 5 big platforms. They're leading the charge with generative AI, and they want to be the winners. And by the way, the game is we know who the winners are. It's not going to be individuals and who are producing the data. The difference here with what we're talking about. Let's look at what these machines are ingesting. Right? They're ingesting all of human creativity, right? Everything that is, written and in journal or book form, has already been ingested a long time ago. What's being ingested right now as we speak is what's on the internet, and that's what's on the internet created by people, by us, is what's generating massive amounts of data that is now being trained for these generative AI models, these large language models. So it all comes back to the data, to the personal data that, in large measure, that we create. So the models are they care less about who owns the data, who created the data. It could be somebody's academic's life work, or a brilliant person's life's work, and it doesn't matter. The model is indiscriminate to who created it. It spits out a very powerful tool to do certain things, including commercial outcomes. And there's no sharing of the commercial outcome with the people that created the data. It's as I said, it's the apps and the platforms and the products that are created by these large language models are looking to make the money and keep it in the in the company that creates it, not share it with the data generators. And I would argue that we should be able to identify whose data goes into the models, and if the data is helping generate value, there's some value sharing. And equally importantly, let's give individuals the choice as to whether they want their data to be used in the first instance. And they may want it to be used for certain cases, and not in other cases. They may want to give it away if it's a common good purpose, like curing a disease, and they may not want to give it away if it's being used for a different purpose. And so we can now establish provenance of data. So let's do it, and not just we're all just mindlessly creating data that a few companies are scraping, aggregating, and exploiting. We're in a different place now than we were 20 years ago. We know how powerful the internet is. We know the good things that it can do. We know the harms that it can do. Let's fix the design to mitigate a bulk of the harms that are being done, and really optimize for the good things that are being done. Andrew, if I was a contractor building a water system for 1 million people somewhere, and 600,000, and the system is built and the results are in, and 600,000 people were getting clean, healthy, nutritional water, and 400,000 people were getting, toxic poison water that was making them sick and killing some of them, we wouldn't be sitting here saying, oh, well, more people than not are getting good water. There would be an outcry. Fix the problem. And my God, in Flint, Michigan, when a community, we learned that a community was drinking tainted lead-based water, there was an outcry. And why is there, it should no longer be a kind of a mystery, right? There needs to be an outcry that the way things are working is creating a lot of damage. So let's calmly fix the problem. It's an engineering problem.
Final question, Frank. You've been very generous with your time. You brought up Flint. And some of the issues in terms of AI being fought out now in the courts. The New York Times is suing OpenAI. We've had artists on the show suing some of these platforms for illegal use of their content. I take your point on that. But you brought up Flint, which is an interesting example. And this is a final question. You seem to think that, or maybe I'm wrong, that all this can be solved through tech, through another protocol or another layer on the internet. But some people might argue, especially since you brought up Flint, that this only really gets resolved with regulation. That the water supply in Flint has been addressed not because of new tech or new businesses, but because the regulators, local government and federal government, got involved Is there a role, Frank, in your biggest fight in this reclaiming of liberty, humanity, and dignity in the digital age? Is there a role for government? Government's now addressing this. Biden wants to ban TikTok, all sorts of talk in Washington, D.C. about new regulation on the platforms. Or can this all get fixed through the initiatives of guys like you and Project Liberty? Can this be done with or without government?
Well, I certainly hope I haven't given your listeners the impression that this can all be solved by tech alone. I mentioned earlier that Project Liberty, it's not really even a tech project. Now, what do I mean by all that? If we don't fix the design of the internet, and it's, again, at the user end, it will look and feel very much the same. But if we don't put individuals in charge and return ownership and control of the data to individuals and fix it, I don't believe we're going to be able to go solve for a lot of other problems that we should be spending our precious and valuable and scarce resources on, like climate change and all the other political issues we talk about and hear about and read about every day. So the point is, if we don't fix the tech, it's going to be far, far more difficult to solve other problems, perhaps impossible if we can't even agree on what the facts are. Now, however, to make this all successful, and Project Liberty comes forward with two other tracks. One is we need the smartest people out there who are interested and passionate about this to be involved, because this is a social project. This is a political project. This is one where we need better policies, and we need to design the tech to actually be in harmony with our societal goals, not have tech that is completely indifferent to our societal goals. And as I mentioned earlier, I think ultimately we need people involved here, because it's the moms concerned about their kids, for instance, that are going to change things. It's not just some fancy tech. It's getting people involved here. Now, on the regulatory front, I am concerned at the moment that our elected officials are not moving on this set of issues. We have a presidential election, and this issue should be front and center because it's the most important issue of our time, in my belief. And I make that case in the book, and we're not talking about it. And sadly, these elected officials are taking money from these platforms in great amounts, and they're using the platforms to raise money and to charge, to rile up voters. And we see the most extreme positions are the ones that get the most clicks and the most followers and the most likes, and are optimized on search engines. And then the media is now seeing what's trending, seeing what's being optimized, and that becomes our news. It's a vicious cycle that we need to break. So I think innovation first, regulation